Good evening, dear colleagues. Good morning for those of you who are in the United States, and good day for everyone who is in Europe. And whatever time of the day, like wherever you are currently, welcome. This is a very exciting day for us for a number of reasons. Today we are introducing two very important endeavors, two very important projects that are very dear to us. Which are very, very important for us. One is we are launching a new journal, and the name of the journal, the title of the journal is Ketmen, International Journal for Central Asian Voices. Secondly, we are launching the very first special issue of this journal, right, which is titled The Autoethnography of Spiritual Practices in Central Asia. Both of these projects, both of these ideas were born on the pages of our now quite solid and large Facebook group titled Central Asian Academic and Analytical Writing Support Community. This is the community of scholars from Central Asia and those who are interested in Central Asia who are passionate about raising local Central Asian scholarship. And both of these ideas were kind of were born during the discussion and in the circles of this community, right? But both of them have kind of the same goal in mind, right? Is to help raise the local voices from the region. And to help us provide local and slightly experimental, innovative perspective on certain issues. So today we will be joined by 4 co-authors who published in our first special issue, we will have Sofya, Boulay, we have Ulan Bigozhin, we have Hikoyat, Salimova, and we will have Aikokul, Maksutova. We have 3 more authors in the journal. Myself, I have a contribution. Also, Galina Kaladzinskaya and Gulniza Talabekova, right? Unfortunately, we couldn't fit all into just 1 hour, 1.5 hour program. And they also couldn't commit to today's presentation. So we have 4 presentations. And before we start, I'll make a very quick introduction into the journal, right? And then also a very quick introduction into the special issue. And as a discussant, today we have our very good friend, a colleague whom we respect a lot, Dr. Alima Bissenova, who is the professor at the Nazarbayev University. For now, just 1 second. Okay. Since the time is short, let me quickly jump into the presentation of the journal. Just give me 1 second. Share screen. Yes. Okay. So here it is. The journal is still very fresh, you know, so to say, just out of the oven. So to say, the IT specialist, we've been working with IT specialists up to like this afternoon, finalizing certain things. So it's still rough. It doesn't work very well in the Safari platform, but it works quite decently in Google Chrome and maybe some other browsers, right? So this is our main page, right? The address for the journal is ketmen.org, and the journal, the full title of the journal is Ketmen, International Journal for Central Asian Voices. You can browse through these, right? The purpose of the journal is basically to establish an international platform where scholars from the Central Asian region can publish their academic work and share it with scholars and readers both inside and outside of the region. And like there are a few main sort of ideas about about Ketmen, what it stands for. The Ketmen itself means a hole, right? And it usually used as to dig the ground for all kinds of purposes, soil tillage, creating irrigation ditches, mixing clay for bricks, etc., etc. But for us, we thought that this is a very good concept that symbolizes many things associated with the journal, right? And the author of the concept is here with us today, Daniyar Karabayev, the professor from American University of Central Asia, right? So he came up with the idea of the name for the journal, right? So we envision that Ketmen will help till the soil of Central Asian academia. It will dig the irrigation ditches to connect distant parts of the region with each other, and it will also help build the foundations of the houses of local academic knowledge. And what is also very important is that it's usually Ketmen is associated with hard labor and with folk on the ground, right? So it kind of reflects the non-elitist status of the journal and of its contributors. It will be regional, multi, and interdisciplinary journal, right? It will have several types of publications, right? Contributions, academic papers, then the papers written in alternative genres, and also maybe some artistic projects, right? We envision that we'll be publishing also in multiple languages, including local languages. It is based at the American University of Central Asia. And what is most important, right, is we try to push forward the kind of very innovative and experimental approach, right? And we think that if we want to build new local Central Asian academic tradition, scholarly tradition, we must experiment, right? We must try different new things, right? It will be hard to come up with something new if we stick to the traditional palette of instruments, right? And we will soon be inviting a large number of scholars who we we know to become the members of our editorial board. Now, since the journal is online, we think that it will publish maybe hopefully 3, 4, but at least hopefully 2, 3 issues a year, right? And perhaps one other thing worth mentioning, right, is one of the purpose, right, is to help decolonize knowledge on Central Asia, right, by providing authors with the platform where they can publish from, right? And so here you have the information for authors and all the instructions of how you can submit the contribution. And now let me jump into the very first issue that we are presenting, the autoethnography. As an intro, it has local so each paper is available sort of if you click on it, right, it will open and it will take you into a page about the paper, right, and it will also give you a chance to download the paper in PDF format, right? All papers now have DOI indexes, properly formatted, and hopefully like working well. So just a couple of words about the idea of the journal before I pass it to the authors. So we've started with the knowledge that quite a lot has been written on religion in Central Asia. But there are two kind of perspectives that are dominating, right? One is the Western scholarly perspective, right? Like most of the books that are published on religion are written by Western scholars. And if you look at the journals like Central Asian Survey, for example, right, the first 40 searches on religion give you 40 Western authors, right, and only two local names from the region which are co-authors, right? So this is one kind of dominating perspective. The second is also the perspective that besides academic papers, there's quite a lot written in the policy world, right? And this is mostly research which has been committed by various international organizations, and most of them target the issues of extremism, radicalization, etc. Right? And so the local voice and local scholarship is gradually growing, right? And there are a number of local authors who are already publishing on this subject, but it is still somewhat marginal. But one voice that it was really missing, right, in all this chorus of voices, right, is the voice of academics who themselves are religious practitioners, or who are think deeply about the issues of their identity as researchers when they do research on religion, right? And so that is why today we have, in this whole issue, we have 7 papers. Sort of 4 papers are written by academics who themselves are quite religious, right, and who are practicing religion. So Sofya will talk about this new religious movement, right, that takes people from Central Asia to the ashrams in India. Ulan Bigozhin will talk about his experience of growing up in the family of Saids and Khojas and going through different stages of his life, right, towards his building his Muslimness, right, and becoming a Muslim. Galina Kolodzinskaya, she's not here with us, writes about her experience of becoming a Protestant Christian. I write about my own experience with Islam, and also with specific focus on my family, on my family of my friends, right, looking at how spirituality affects families who were not religious when they were formed, and then one of the members becomes religious. Then Hikoyat will talk about her very complex relationship with her Muslim identity, right? She will share this today with us. And then we have 2 papers, right, which are written, again, from on the questions of positionality, right? And how do we study religion, how local scholars study religion, and what kind of issues, topics, themes evolve in the process. And there are a number of themes that are cross-casting, that includes family, identity, geography, etc. So these are described in the introduction. I invite everyone to have a look at these papers, but let me stop at this point, right? Because time is limited, and let me invite to the table, so to say, right? Aikokul Maksutova, because Aikokul had just had a baby, as she has informed us. So congratulations, Aikokul. And the baby is still sleeping, so we have maybe 20 minutes before she wakes up, right? So we like for her to go first.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, great. And then let me just start. All right. Okay, so thank you very much. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Emil and Sofya, for taking the lead on this important initiative. It's indeed a big honor to be involved in the first and special issue of the, how I call it, a truly Central Asian scientific journal. And thank you also, for giving us the opportunity, this fantastic opportunity to collaborate with all these bright minds from Central Asia throughout these almost 2 years now. Yeah. So let me go over to my presentation. So in this article, yeah, my co-author, yeah, Aibekyanov and I write about researcher positionality in the religious research context. So we discussed the advantages and advantage of insider position in the religious research context, which result from our own shared identities with our research population. And then we elaborate on how these identity markers, the shared identity markers, create certain challenges for our work in this field and beyond even. So in doing so, we put our own experiences from various research projects that we had the opportunity to work on in and outside Kyrgyzstan under scrutiny. So what we do not do in this paper, I'd like to give the warning from the beginning, is that we do not provide an overview of the relevant literature on positionality discourse, because the overall of the purpose of this paper amounts to self-reflection and drawing lessons from our own lived experiences. And we also want to generate new knowledge and hopefully in affiliation with particular discourse trends in the end. So however, we I'd like to give you just a very mere glimpse into the positionality discourse, so that we have this overall starting knowledge basis. So this topic has been much discussed in social sciences in recent years, in recent decades even. So shifting the discourse perspective from a rigid dichotomous separation of insider and outsider researcher to a more fluid positioning on the insider and outsider continuum. A growing number of scientists argue in favor of a more nuanced conceptualization of outsider-insider positioning to reflect researchers' complex identities, ever-changing research contexts and power relations in the field, whereas others further promote the idea of fluidity in researchers' positioning, which suggests that this position can change from an outsider to in-betweener through creating a third special space between these dichotomous positions. Within the whole process of the field research. So what we do is we build on these general assumptions and start our self-reflection journey from the assumption that the researcher position, whatever it was in the beginning, on this continuum depends on the complex research setting. Each setting then represents a multi-layered construct of shared and non-shared markers between the researcher and the researcher and the research population, and the individual perceptions that each of the sites might have, and the reasonings were behind these perceptions. So building on these general arguments, we started off, just a second. Oops, here. We started off to examine the factors that play a special role in gaining and maintaining access to the field in the religious research setting, and possible pitfalls and virtues our identities as the researchers may bring with them. So in order to explore this question, we first looked introspectively into ourselves as researchers who come from Central Asia and who identify themselves with Islam and partially practicing Muslims, doing the research with the practicing Muslims from Central Asia in Central Asia and beyond, and then reflected on our own lived experiences from the field research, and identified a number of identity markers that were important to us in accessing the field and defining the level of acceptance by the target population and the quality of interaction with it. So as most relevant markers, we identified such markers like language, gender, cultural competence, religion, ethnic or and geographic origin. And of course, there might be some other relevant markers that are also that may also play a role, but we decided to stick to these couple of markers that played in our role, played a role in our field experiences. So what we did is we further elaborated on how each of these markers generally defined our positions as researchers, and discussed the merits and challenges that the shared or even unshared identity markers posed during the field research, while gaining the access and trying to get the information and affecting the degree to which we ourselves were accepted by the target population and the quality of the interaction between us, thus the overall quality of the raw data that we managed to gather. So I won't go into details of each marker here due to time, but you're welcome to read the article by yourselves for further details. So as a result, we came up with three main findings. First of all, we argue that an inside and outsider position is not a static state and does not necessarily remain stable throughout the research process. Sharing certain and easily identifiable markers with the research population may facilitate initial communication with it, but does not necessarily and automatically grant access to all the depth and breadth of the information that we require. The researcher's position is sensitive to the micro settings of the field, and mostly access depends on what message our visible markers like those that we examined, like language, visual language or visual characteristics, communicate, and how these messages are interpreted on the recipient side. If the recipients recognize the researcher or us as trustworthy and safe, we may be granted access to the anticipated insider information. Should those markers, the shared markers or non-shared markers, trigger suspicion or resentment or even mistrust among the recipients, the researcher can be quickly pushed into an outsider position. So this figure should show them how the position of the researcher is fluid and how it depends on the way the researcher interacts with the population via certain markers. So, and the second argument is that we think that to obtain an insider position, the researcher does not necessarily have to originate from the same research population, speak its languages fluently, or have profound knowledge of the local culture. A researcher who begins the research journey as an outsider can eventually change his or her position throughout the research process, just like a researcher who is deemed an insider initially can be denied access to certain groups due to specific markers, non-shared markers, or even shared markers, deeds, or even mistakes. So the third argument that we have is that once we got the opportunity to gather the information that we wanted to have, to access, we also need to realize that obtaining this kind of insider data is also means accessing very highly sensitive information, and the handling of this sensitive information requires a researcher's profound ethical engagement and even informed reaction. This means that researcher must carefully consider possible data handling options beforehand, and even know or have thought about the related risks to himself or herself during and after the field research. Research, particularly on religious, ethnic, racial, or cultural identities, requires extreme sensitivity when not only when generating or processing, but also while analyzing, interpreting, and sharing data, because such kind of sensitive information, sensitive data can be easily instrumentalized for purposes that are not necessarily ethically sound. So some bright examples were written in our article, so you are welcome to read how we experience these ethically sensitive cases and how we decided to go with it. So to round up, we concluded in the article that an insider, outsider, or changing positional affiliation should not be considered simply as a blessing or curse for researchers, but should rather be viewed as an interplay of contested and fluid identities that requires constant reflexivity on the part of the researchers. So what we have done is there's a very highly, for us, it was a highly important exercise to think about who we are in the field and what kind of role do we have while gaining the access to the field, while getting access to the insider information, while analyzing and interpreting this data, and how we deal with this, with the consequences of what we publish, yeah, and how we publish. So with the focus on the researcher objectivity and with the purpose, or the overall purpose, to produce objective, as much as possible, objective and quality knowledge, which can be useful for others as well. So this is a very short introduction to the to our article. It was a kind of the work or article that or topic which comes from our heart, yeah, because it was a great opportunity to share the experiences that we did, yeah. Otherwise, such kind of notes, yeah, that we have usually in our field diaries, that they are just gone, or they're just somewhere, they lie somewhere on the table and without ever being shared with other researchers. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, you're welcome to email me. Yeah, the email you'll find under, I think, under the article on the website. Should I be gone, now, yeah, in 10 minutes because of my baby. So I'd be very glad to hear your feedback or questions, or your own shared experiences with me and with my co-author. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We are recording the presentation.
Ah, great.
You'll be able to see the questions later on. So thank you so much, Aikokul. And our next speaker will be Sofya du Boulay. My French is terrible, of course. But yeah, Sofya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emil. Just a second. Sharing my screen. Okay. Slideshow. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining. I would like to start my presentation with asking two main questions. And the first one would be, how do individual narratives from Central Asia shape our understanding of communal religious practices? And second one will be, do insiders' experience matter even while examining those complex socio-cultural contexts of contemporary religious landscape. So, and obviously what our special issue is trying to achieve is we believe that autoethnographic methods could be used to illuminate the discussion on that complexity of spiritual identity in Central Asia and introduce the missing nuanced layers of personal and cultural context. So first of all, let's talk about what autoethnography is. So it's relatively new genre in social science. It has interdisciplinary roots in anthropology, communication studies, and even arts. In a simplistic way, you can view autoethnography as a symbiosis of autobiography and ethnography. That's, I think, is the easiest way to understand it. It began as a provocative movement against colonial ethnographic data collection practices that mostly promoted detached observation and neutrality of a researcher positionality. So ethnography was a reaction that empowered marginalized voices. And instead of running away from subjectivity, it embraces and celebrates lived experience and subjectivities. And obviously it encourages reflective narrative where researcher himself or herself is integrated within own subject of study. And just on as a last note would be from my own experience, writing about the self in the Central Asian context is quite a problematic and challenging task, because what do we mean by self? And when I was writing my spiritual journey, I would always find myself using my voice within the voices of my family members or other ashram visitors. So I will briefly introduce you to a short spiritual journey of mine. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was this period of spiritual revelation and a new age spirituality, and my family became quite interested in different types of philosophy, and my auntie, my mother, started practicing yoga in early as 1992-94. They became vegetarian. And one of the consequences of such a lifestyle was finding an Indian guru and going to the ashram. And when I was 5 years old, I went to the ashram of an Indian guru called Sri Satya Sai Baba. And it was a spiritual journey. And and in my ethnography, I took in detail the early impressions of the guru, my thoughts, and all of this new experience of traveling to India, learning about different Hindu gods, etc. And there was this big movement in Central Asia, including Kazakhstan, and even Satya Sai organization was established in 1998. But what was also interesting for me to do with this paper, try to understand what sort of, how can we cluster or categorize people that travel from Central Asia to the Indian ashram of Sai Baba. And obviously from my 25 years experience of going there, I can notice that there are different motivations behind visiting the ashram. So I was coming with 4 types of people who go to the ashram from Central Asia. And the first one would be spiritual seekers, people who sincerely want to find spiritual meaning in life. They form themselves either in groups or individually, and they visit the ashram They're normally experienced pilgrims that already well traveled. They've been to Tibet, they've been to Nepal, and they've even visited other Indian ashrams. As you know, India is famous for its spiritual sites. But what's quite peculiar with spiritual seekers, they're always in this continuous spiritual search journey. They never fully content with one particular practice. And in my narrative, I give examples of friends of mine or just people I know that would travel to Sai-Baba Ashram, but then for various reasons choose a different path, and you would meet them in other spiritual sites. Second type of people that travel from Central Asia would be enlightenment tourists. So as you know, obviously neoliberal economy is everywhere, and there is even a commodification of spirituality, and there are people who make profit from these spiritual journeys, and they provide the experience of visiting an ashram as a part of this exotic sightseeing location, and there is not much spirituality involved there. More, it's for enlightenment tourists, it's more about purchasing an experience or entertainment. Third type of people are miracle hunters, people who would like to cure themselves or have some family issues or other difficult situations in life, and they think that by visiting an ashram they can suddenly heal themselves. Or, well, for example, in case of Sai-Baba, there are a lot of cases when he would heal different people. So, and in my story I give example of my uncle who came to pray for his son, his son's family who couldn't conceive a child for 9 years. And actually, after visiting the ashram, the grandson was miraculously born without any medical intervention. So there are many kind of examples like that. And the fourth type of people who visit the ashram are most devoted kind of pilgrims, for whom visiting the ashram is a lifestyle. It's just a part of day-to-day spiritual practice, because in the ashram they can continue what they do in their daily life, meditation, chanting spiritual anthems, and having discussions about meanings of life, different virtues, etc. And yeah, and obviously I find myself, it's very difficult for me to just locate myself in one of these categories. So I think I find myself a little bit in all of this, and probably pilgrims would be the one that I would stick with. And in conclusion, I would like to just remind that autoethnography is really a fun and interesting method that can reveal all these little personal nuances of various contexts, and it could be used and travel beyond religious practices. You can use it in day-to-day life or describing eating habits, etc., or even political choices. It can empower insiders' perspectives as well, and I quite liked Aikokul's presentation about insiders and fluid identity. And various people visit spiritual sites for various reasons, and I think what my paper also brings to the table is looking into two different geographical locations, Central Asia and India. Thank you very much. Emil?
Thank you very much, Sofya. This is wonderful. Yes, and our next speaker is Ulan Bigozhin, who is a professor at the Nazarbayev University. Ulan, the floor is yours. Ulan, can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, hello, yeah. Sorry, yeah, hello everyone. Welcome to opening of our great project. And special thanks to our main organizers, Sofya, Emil, main initiators. So yeah, I don't have PPT in general, and as I said, and Emil told me we have only 10 minutes. So yeah, I decided just to. It was very interesting project. In general, I think I don't want to kind of like go through the description of what was written in general, right? Anyway, I think the Ketmen will be published and people get more details. Writing autoethnography was pretty interesting thing and a bit challenging, kind of challenging a lot. Plus, Alima Bissenova published, like I think a year ago, an article about being in the field, right? The whole idea of being native and non-native anthropologist. What is a field, when field ends, when field starts, right? And I kind of catch myself also several times in my mind. So not just about this autoethnography, but everything what I wrote about Islam in Kazakhstan. And was it actually a kind of thing as a result of what went? Was it like it was my own experience. It was, but was this experience kind of, how was it objective, right? Where is the line? Where is this line between, like, you know, in the field, out of field, being objective as much as you can, at the same time being anthropologist, and how not to cross like you know, like getting so-called like native perspectives. And again, native perspectives are very things which are also kind of criticized now. I mean, so we a bit being native anthropologists and writing out autoethnography is a kind of trippy thing. You are balancing between you want to write about this topic, but at the same time you're always constantly asking, so was my experience on Islam in Kazakhstan, my family which went through this circle, interesting changes of environment from in 80s and 90s, how it's actually, is it universal? I mean, does it apply for the large chunk of society, you know? If I would return back to my autoethnography, it was an interesting case. I came from, I think, a bit unusual Kazakhstani family, Kazakh family. We traveled a lot. Our family changed locations, which was, as my impression, after talk when I've met many, like my classmates, my friends in Almaty, etc., in Chu, in Kazakhstan, when I was usually telling that we lived in Tsarinograd, then we moved to Zherem, we've been in Kustanai, we lived in Stepnogorsk, then we went to Shu. So there's always 100 kilometers, several hundred, and between Shu and Stepnogorsk there is even more than 1,000 kilometers, right, practically. And the friends constantly ask me, like, so your father was a military personnel, you know, I mean, or why they were, I mean, this is quite common for Soviet military personnel to move place to place, but we were quite mobile. That probably made me an anthropologist in some sense, I believe. I lived in northern Kazakhstan. I was born in Tsarinograd, in semi-industrial suburb, which was called Kazgarodok, which was pretty interesting area. It was a village within the city. And so we had a Tsarinograd, the city of Tsariniki, very Russified, like typical Soviet city, alleys and parks and DK and kinotheatre and etc. But at the same time, Kazgarodok was a kind of micro village, the remnants of strange mixture of Soviet kolkhoz, collective farm, populated mostly by Kazakhs, by Kazakh family. And we were also sacred lineage. We were Khojas. It was kind of some sense of sub-identity. It was kind of special status among Kazakh within the Kazakh genealogical system, and and the religion was with us. I remember from my childhood, and I mentioned in my autoethnography that there was some Muslim celebration, and by the age of 7 or by 86, 87, grandmother taught us basic surahs, and we're getting, like, for reciting the surahs, we're getting money to buy ice cream. So yeah, from relatives. But at the same time, it was very Soviet. I mean, the whole lineage went through Soviet modernity. We celebrated New Year with alcohol, you know, like, and but at the same time, we kept genealogy. And the turning point was probably perestroika, late 80s. My grandfather died in 89. And his funeral, the arrival of new Imam to Tselinograd, Imam Faizullah, this seriously changed the religious mood in the family. Family become more religious. And we were so-called typical, as I can say, like in some sense, Northern Kazakhstan is Soviet family, traditional Soviet gender, you know, roles, like mother is school teacher, father is engineer, right? Sounds like a Soviet textbook. Yeah. So, and then we left northern landscape and we moved to Shu, and there I've met independence practically there. So we moved to the Zhambyl Oblast, very southern city, you know, and it was really totally different environment. And interesting that our family transition, right, our migration from north to south actually coincide with the collapse of Soviet Union, the rise of nationalism, the rise of religiosity. And in Chu Valley, we started to encounter Islam on a daily basis. And at that time, I remember the first big Nowruzes, you know, like open celebrations. I remember the Qurban Eids, the other Muslim celebrations, the Khuday Tamak, you know, like things which appeared. Local imams started to visit it, not only our house, but like the Kazakh neighborhood definitely. That was very interesting, very romantic period, bit from 91, you know, like up to, I don't know, 94, 97 maybe. And the arrival of mullahs, so-called kandastar or oral monks. I saw two mullahs in my childhood. One of them was Afghani refugee, I mean, Afghani Kazakh, with some descendants of Kazakhs who moved to Iran and Afghanistan. Then another one, and the local mullah who was a Tarazi Uzbek, but I mean, he was a Hoja also. It was very interesting, you know, like, I mean, in my sense, and we talked with Sofya and Emil when I wrote that maybe the travels there, what my family witnessed, I mean, kind of coincide with what maybe religious community of Kazakhstan in general went through. So the romantic period of perestroika, the rise of nationalism, religiosity, then the spread of Islam as form of education, as in forms of first medrese, spreading of Iman Shart books. And then in 97, when I moved to Almaty, for the first time, I encountered Salafis, you know, like I didn't know that was the Salafi Islam. Actually, my interest in my trip to Salafis went through Ahmadiyat. And I met, I contacted first with Ahmadiyat Muslim, and with Sofya, we discovered that actually we visited in maybe, I mean, I don't know about visited, but we've met the same person, Ghulam Mustafa from Almaty, you know, who was the head of Ahmadiyat, right? How the world is small. And there in Almaty, I probably got more of scripturalist education. And I think in some sense, I was 17, 18 at that time. And that was a period where I think many of my countrymates, who moved to cities like Almaty, they probably encountered and witnessed this kind of more orthodox scripturalist form of religiosity. And the contact with Salafis actually was one of the, I mean, actually inspired me to write a paper, I remember, for the first conference at Indiana University about I think the title was something like Radicalization of Kazakhstani Youth. At that time, I believed in radicalization. So, yeah, and that's this paper actually, which I wrote at the age of 22, I think 23, was actually based on my experience being part of Salafi Jamaat for around a year, maybe year and a half. And there actually I saw how it was a bit so-called different Islam, you know, and I remember how this form of religiosity built for some period barriers between myself and my parents, who kind of, I mean, and there was actually, it's coincided also with their first Chechen war, end of first Chechen war, beginning of the second war, the anti-Salafi pressure, the demonization of I mean, in general, of Muslims and Islam, and then it's also ended. This stage of religiosity is also ended, right? I mean, and what I want to say, like that, I'm not pretending in my autoethnography that my experience is like the 100% right representation of religious processes which happen within the country. But I think in some sense, it reflects maybe some major processes through of what Kazakhstani society went and experienced. Yeah, that's one.
Thank you so much, Ulan. Yes, indeed, I agree. Yeah, the stages that you have mentioned, and religion is never static. You know, our understanding or perception of it is never stable, and perhaps this is also how Aikokul was talking about this. Okay, and last but not least, right? Our colleague from Uzbekistan, Hikoyat Salimova, will talk about her own experience with Muslim identity. Hikoyat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emil. 1 second, let me share my screen. Good evening, everybody, or good morning, whoever who is in whatever different time zone. I want to thank organizers and guests for this really great event, because I was actually this theme and this topic has been brewing in my mind ever since I probably entered Western academia. I want to mention that it started from Western academia because in my academic life in Uzbekistan, this question never came to my thought. And the questioning of my own Muslim identity that also began from my first trip to US, when the first time I met the US custom officer, who was like asking me, where are you from? And for my answer that I'm from Uzbekistan, the only part that he heard was the Stan part. And then he decided immediately that I must be from some of this, like Pakistan, or the country where like it's probably alerted him with terrorism. And that was actually 1 year or 2 years after post 9/11 events. US wasn't the best place to announce that you're Muslim. So for the question of US custom officer, are you a Muslim? I was like, yes, but then I was also at the same time hesitant whether I could admit that I am Muslim or not, whether I was a Muslim or not, because in their opinion, I didn't look like Muslim, but growing up in Uzbekistan in a Muslim family where Islam is more like a hereditary tradition that comes from, if you are born in a Muslim family, you are automatically a Muslim considered. And rarely like Uzbeks rarely leave the Islam as a religion. And that's kind of like being shamed also, or at the same time, it takes a lot of courage to do that, because community in Uzbekistan is very strong, and communal ties, they require you to be like everybody else. And if you are somehow abnormal, like I say, quote unquote abnormal, of course, it's not that I mean that people who denounce their religion are abnormal, but in Uzbekistan, among Uzbek community, if Uzbeks try to leave the face of their ancestors, they're being shamed, they're being denounced sometimes from their families, and there were like cases where like they became like pariahs in the family. So in any case, that wasn't the case of my story. And luckily, this is the autoethnography, and the topic which I really liked, because I find this great floor to really tell and analyze also my own identity, being a Muslim, being a woman, being from Uzbekistan, which used to be technically Islamic state. I mean, like was predominantly Muslim land, but then it had to be forcefully imposed by atheism through the Soviet times, and then it has seen revival of Islam after the post-Soviet times. So here is my story, which is based on how Emil greatly put these pillars, 3 pillars in the introduction, that family, geography, and identity. These are like shape the form of my article. So my own identity has been deeply influenced by the family that I'm coming from. And here I wanted to show the fluidity of the generational transitions, that I absorbed certain traditions that are coming from my grandmother, then the middle generation, these are my parents, my father and mother, and the younger generation, my close siblings, my sister and brother, plus some of the cousins that I have seen their religious practices. And the second great pillar on which my Muslim identity has been shaped, I would say, this is geography. Since I am one of those young Muslim, young Uzbeks who had the opportunity to not only just like travel for a visit abroad, but also lived extensively. Like, for example, in US, I totally spent around more than 5 years. In Germany, I spent more than 7 years. So this different geographical locations where Islam is not necessarily a predominant religion, and on the other hand, it's like Christianity. So those experiences of relocation, physical relocation, have influenced on my religious identity as well. So here I want to point out that US was the stepping stone for me to have the first religious identity crisis, when I started questioning my own Muslim identity, whether I'm like true Muslim or not. People say that I'm not wearing hijab, or I'm not like praying 5 times per day. So I started questioning my own self. Am I a Muslim or not? But then the other great thing about those travels that I had, since I was in academic environment in both in US and Germany, and I had been exposed to a lot of students from different countries, including other Muslim countries, and I have seen Muslims from different Muslim countries. So and then I realized that there is no one face of Muslim identity. Muslim person can be different, and in different countries it has a different influence depending on the language, traditions, the historical past, habits. So there is no one picture of this is the typical Muslim woman supposed to be like this. So then in Germany, after so many years and being already in Germany, like in US, I was in my 20s, and in Germany, I was in my 30s. Then I think like the age also influenced on my affirmation of my religious identity, that I put aside my own kind of doubts about like whether I'm Muslim or not. And then by returning last year to Tashkent, I have started revising what is Islam means and how my own peers are practicing, and how Islam is changing its face in the modern Uzbekistan. So these different factors, they all influenced on my Muslim identity. And like here, I just pointed out these different geographical locations that you can see that I have been like living in 3 different parts of the world. Unfortunately, not some others are left around, but wanted to show in this presentation more like a pictures, which I couldn't reflect on my paper. You're welcome to read and direct to me your questions and answers, but this is my first guru, or like, I don't want to say like my role model, my grandmother. Here, she's to the left on this picture, and to the right is my mom in her youth. This picture is from 1973-74, when my mom was first-year student in Dushanbe, and my grandma visited her. Here you can see, I speak in my article a lot about headscarves, because this kind of reflects, it's the first image that people see as the Muslim woman supposed to wear, hijab. Like, this is the first image that comes to the mind of Westerners. However, in the article that I wrote, I want to argue that Muslim women can be different, can wear different clothing. So here is the example how traditionally in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, these are quite similar countries. And since my mom is Tajik and she's originally from Tajikistan, so my grandma, the role model that I'm using, she is a traditional Tajik woman. However, it's not one of the cases. Same clothing could be seen among Uzbek women as well, and I will show in the later pictures too. So this is the way how they tie headscarf on their hair, on their head. So they need to just cover the hair, so the hair shouldn't be seen, but the neck could be open, unlike hijab wearing, and there is no need to wear niqab, which is covering the face. And this is the way how my mom, as a young Helene, so the young bride, or like not bride, but like a daughter-in-law, comes to the family, and the traditional dressing, the wearing of headscarf was required, especially in Tashkent. But since she is a little bit more Russified, westernized by studying in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, she still wants to use some of her like fashion. She's wearing it in more fashionable style and leaving some hair in front of her. This is me and my sister when we were kids. So here is another example. This picture is taken in Bahauddin Naqshbandi complex, which is saint place or holy place, pilgrimage site in Bukhara. And these are my aunties, like grand aunties. As you can see, my aunt, my grand aunt, great aunt, another aunt, and another great aunt, my grandma from that side, another aunt, and everybody. So you can see women are wearing headscarf in a slightly different way. Not everybody is covering their hair completely, totally. Like my grandma, she always wanted to, from that side, she always wanted to show a little bit hair. So did my mom. She doesn't like wearing headscarf. Even nowadays, although she's in she's over 66 now, she wears headscarf only for when she goes to mosque, or like during the prayer, or during certain ceremonies like Fotiha or Janaza. So these are certain events that are related to Muslim rituals. where they want to wear, they are required to wear headscarf, but nobody is requiring like wearing like the full outfit of hijab. So this is how majority Muslim women look like, dress in Uzbekistan. So in this, looking at my elder generation peers, I am more convinced that I also have the right to call myself Muslim, even being dressed in more Western style. So this is also the gathering of students in US. These are my peers. They're all Muslims. As you can see, they also wear all the Western dressing, and nobody has any complaint about it. So this is also another gathering of international students, but in this case we have a representative of Hinduism, of Buddhism, of Christianity, and Muslims. So these are what I find fascinating about my life in US, that we could communicate, we could share about our different religious identities without being pushed into one or another religion. And this is my time in Germany, where my close friends became Muslim girls who wore hijab. One girl is from Tunisia, another girl is from Indonesia, and we had numerous discussions about different practices that we have, like being a Muslim woman from different countries. And what I gained reaffirmation, affirmation of my Muslim identity, is that none of them would judge me by my looks. They will never tell me to wear hijab or never force me to do anything that they do. The only thing that we were trying to share, that we all eat halal food when we gather together. And this picture is actually from internet. I don't take it. It's not my picture, but I want to show, this is a picture from 70s. It's next to Chorsu Bazaar near Kukaldash Madrasa. As you can see, in that part of the world, in that time period, this is how women used to dress, like with the headscarves, as I have shown in on my example of my mom, my grandmother, my aunts. And here is modern picture from Chorsu. As you can see, majority, especially why I took this picture as example from Chorsu, because that part of the world, it's an old city, and a lot of inhabitants of that area, they want to become stricter Muslims, and a lot of women wear hijab in that area, and that's kind of the modern day pictures that you can see in that part of Tashkent. So Tashkent is also a multifaceted city. It doesn't have one or two representations.
Sorry to interrupt you, Hikoyat. You have 1 minute, okay?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm finishing now. With this presentation, what I want to say is that our identity is shaped by different factors, which are like food, language, clothing, and perhaps I was a little bit hectic in this presentation, but I wanted to show a lot of pictures because I couldn't insert a lot of pictures in the article, but my story shows one of the ways how religious identity could be seen from a different perspective, and not necessarily, we don't have to have one size fit all approach, and we have to I ask everybody to be welcoming of different identities, including religious identities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hikoyat. This is wonderful. Yeah, and it's a real pity that you did not include some of these images into the paper as well. The paper is extremely rich, so I want everyone to look into this. Finally, right, we have our guest, our long-term friend, a colleague, Professor Alima Bissenova from Nazarbayev University, to reflect on the 4 papers and on the special issue. Alima, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for agreeing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emil, for inviting me. congratulations on this great initiative, and congratulations to the authors on publishing. This is a great issue and great autoethnographies. One of the issues that has been discussed, at least in the three papers, the first three papers, the papers by Sofya, Ulan, and Hikoyat, and that you are struggling with, and that I am struggling, is the issue of subjectivity. Yeah? As Ulan said, like, can I be objective? And he also mentioned some of my work, and excuse me for shamelessly promoting it, but I think it's very indeed relevant that I've compared the works of Valikhanov and Levshin, who were writing at the same time, and Valikhanov was very subjective, writing diaries, but also reading 150 years later, more interesting to read and really documental, compared to objective Levshin, who was trying to be scientific and, like very sort of including, describing all Kazakhs and such. And I think there is something to it, and I'll try to explain. Like, now, having read your papers, I think I understood what it is, partly understood what it is. And I think, first of all, reading autoethnographies is interesting. Sometimes more interesting than reading some, studies. It shows the formation of the subject. It shows the dynamic. And in this sense, subjective is more objective. And why is it? And I think it's because you already have your kind of biographic narrative, which is dynamic, right? This is not a snapshot. And let me give you one example. Remember the book by Adib Khalid, Islam After Communism, Religion and Politics in Central Asia? And it starts with a vignette, how Adib Khalid and I have a great respect for Adib Khalid. I have been teaching his two books, Making Uzbekistan and Muslim Cultural Reform, for 10 years in my classes. But this vignette starts, the vignette is about him in the beginning of the 90s, during Ramadan, going to drink with Muslims for Ramadan. They were sitting and let's drink to Ramadan. And that came off a bit offensive to many, and why? Because it doesn't show the dynamics. That this is the beginning of the 90s, that this is just the period when people are opening, when they're, sort of imagining the Islamic identity. And Ulan is writing the same thing about his father, right? How in the end of the 80s, they were having sorghums, they were very aware of their Said identity, but they also had drinks for sorghum, right? And alcohol. And it doesn't come off as offensive at all, right? And it's not because, an insider can say what outsider does not say. No, not at all. Because Ulan shows the dynamic, how his father and his family and community's identity were changing in there, because he has this biographical long-term perspective. So this is one thing, long-term perspective versus an ethnographic snapshot, which is, like a great objective instrument, right? And autoethnography already have it, because we all have, even if you ask me to tell, even if you ask any layperson to tell him or her and he will have a biographic narrative, because as people we have our biographic narratives, anthropologists or not, and this is a longer term perspective that it has. You show how people are changing, how religion, you show contradictions with a gentle way, in a gentle way. It's kind of like, Tagore was saying, like the piercing the veil of objective, how to show India, you should be critical, but you also show it lovingly, right? Gently. And that's maybe because we're gentle to our families and our communities. Even we see there, we criticize them, but it still come out gently, right? And still come out. So dynamics and sort of this gentle attitude, how to show and how. So I love the paper on by Sofya on the spiritual search of her family, which is also very critical, right? But also very gentle of her family experience, which is, you know, very diverse experience with ashram visitations and her experience at with Saiba. I forgot what was the place. Puttaparthi,
yeah.
Puttaparthi ashram, and that's a great experience. Thank you for sharing. And it's just like it really kind of it brought me back to the 90s and how this kind of spiritual search, how people were, you know, like there was real this hunger, right, for something that is religion, and it explains what kind of religion gives to people, right, for what kind of purpose it serves. Like religion is tourism, you say in pilgrimages tour, you say that. What high the second one, I forgot, the first one was the spiritual
enlightenment,
tourist, yeah, tourist, but it's also, but you know, not only, you know, Islam also can be a tourism. Like people, like there are many walks on pilgrimages as tourism. So it's, yes, it's everything. It's like there is, you know, high and low, and it's all in our lives, and you show it. I like how it showed. Ulan paper was, I loved reading it, and it's even though like I was also in Stalingrad, but it's still, you know, it's a different experience because I did not live in Kazgaradok. I was living in the center of the city, and I had, you know, although I know the bazaar, I know like how like these Kazakh compounds, like privately owned houses, and I know that, you know, how you I know this experience of, you know, like how cows were grazing outside of the peripheries of Astana, and you could have this, you know, village, almost a village experience living in the city. And it was like, it was also such a blurry, you know, it was not urban, and it was kind of urban slash rural. So it's also, you know, ambiguous. So if I wanted to, you show this ambiguity, and you show this dynamic, and you show how it's changing, and then you're and I think like it's very objective, because I also, like in the 90s, like you also covered some of my experience, and in your spiritual search in the 90s, this kind of how Russian speaking youth were attracting more to Salafis, because I don't know, Salafis were speaking the same language, Salafis were clearer, Salafis did not have the same hierarchy that you would have like with mullahs and, you know, old authorities and such. And I completely understand this enchantment of Salafis to an urban youth in like even now. And then like having, you know, conflict with the family and being, you know, also too orthodox about things. So it's and in Hikoyat's paper, yeah, this change, how like she travels and she arrives to Uzbekistan, and suddenly Uzbekistan is so much more religious. Like people say that after sneezing you have to say Alhamdulillah. People you hear azan as if you were in Istanbul, and the same thing in Astana. Like I remember in the summer we were saying, and one of my colleagues, is this some he's asking me, is this some religious holiday now? I always hear azan at night. I'm like, well, it's the summer, so the morning prayer is at night earlier, so that's why it's just like people become more aware of their surroundings, and things are changing, and even, you know, like things are changing also seasonally. With prayers, and you will hear azan at night in the summer, not as opposed to winter, and so on. So I think subjective is really more objective in the now that in this sense of autoethnography, and by exactly showing like dynamics, but showing it ethnographically as well, and also being gentle maybe which is, a human way of being gentle to your relatives whom, they're close to you, you understand them with all their shortcomings and defects, and it comes, I don't know, maybe it comes naturally, it's human that you are more gentle in describing these controversial things, very controversial things you are describing, but somehow, it comes off lovingly and interesting. And the last paper by Aikokul and Aibek talk about like research ethics and all this reflection on the ethics, and which is great. Like we should talk more about it, maybe in Central Asian studies and so on. But we should also think about, like Zarmoni was about knowledge production, generating knowledge, but also should like what like for what, and who is reading, and who is audience, and who is the stakeholder. And I was actually a little bit surprised that, like you said, that you are Muslim and that's what makes you insider, but you're also a researcher, but that also makes it outsider. And you discussed a lot of researchers' ethics, but I was wondering, what about Muslim ethics? Which makes you an insider, like researcher ethics has been developed for 20 years, like, and Muslim ethics, it has, like a long history of being elaborated. And there was an interesting, actually, I will also tell you an ethnographic story. So on the 22nd of this month, Ulan sent a mistaken email that today on the 22nd is this meeting. And I am on the 22nd driving to Balkhash with my son.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I mean, like, what did I like, Saram? You read me papers. So he's reading me papers, and we are reading the first. He's downloaded them on phone, and is reading first Aikokul and Aibek's papers. And we are coming to the place, and Salim is also very critical of Islamic hypocrisy, that people say Alhamdulillah, but they wear hijab, but they also wear heavy makeup. They say like all these things, but they also drink and such. And we are coming to a point. He's reading about Aikokul. She has to interview Tablighi community in Moscow, but she's a woman. And it's not kind of easy to get into, and he's like, well, that's so horrible. That's Islam. Like, mom, but that's Islam. I'm thinking, and that's horrible that she's prevented from learning. And I'm like thinking, no, she's not prevented from learning about Islam, like Tabligh. She can learn it. It's just like her purpose of doing this is not studying like Tablighi. Her purpose is writing research about these people. So like she could study Tablighi knowledge maybe in a different circle, like women's circle, or maybe in a, and then they decide that Aibek should serve as her mahram, right? To get access. And I'm like, but she's misleading your informants, because and I'm thinking, if these were her relatives, or like not her relatives, but the people to whom she has to come later, they would tell like, but why did you tell us? Why did you not tell us the truth? I mean, that's and this is not, but this is ethics, right? The Muslim ethics that we as insiders, if we were inside like this community, or the relatives to whom we have to come back, right, at some point of our life, maybe we would think of also of the ethical way of dealing with them without sort of misrepresenting or misleading. This is not to take away of the any of the great value of Aikokul and Aibek's paper, but just like for us as researchers also to think where we are we on the inside or are we on the outside, and who are the stakeholders to whom we owe? Like we as researchers, we say we have to be truthful. Yeah, do we have to be truthful inside the or do we have to be truthful only to the outside when we write up and so on? Like where do we have to be truthful? And maybe here, I don't know, some Muslim ethics would also be useful in thinking and elaborating about these things, like as insiders. And with this, I close my little speech.
Thank you so much, Alima. Great.
Alima, I feel bad, really. I'm
No, but that was a great experience of Serum reading, and we went through like Aikokul, and I backed paper, and then I received an email. Oh, I was mistaken, and then I'm like, Stanton, could you check on Facebook email, like a message from Emil? What date he said? And Serum was saying, "Mom, you're so disorganized. How this can be? Mom, this is so just." I'm like, I'm not disorganized. Like, could you?
It was my disorganization, and I made it 2 times. First of all, I put 26.
But that was yeah.
Then 26th of August, Saturday. I sent the second message to the department. I feel really bad. Sorry. I mean,
no, it's fine. It made for a great bonding experience and discussion about Muslim ethics and such and gender bias and the speaking of
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, but we haven't been teaching offline for 2 years, and last 2 weeks were a bit crazy, really.
Oh my goodness! Tell me about that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, my friends. Thank you very much, Alima. These were wonderful comments here, and very encouraging for us. As everyone who tries to experiment is also afraid of how this whole idea, this whole window will be perceived. So we are almost out. Just have like 3 minutes left. I was wondering if there are any questions from the audience that we can address maybe in the next 5-10 minutes. If anyone would like to comment or ask questions. I understand that it is quite late, and also quite late into the day for those who yeah. Well, maybe not, right? So what we have is this collection of 7 papers, right? To me and to Sofya, right? We co-edited about the special issue. I forgot to mention this very important thing at the beginning, right? This was definitely a very, very interesting experience. We did enjoy working with all the authors, and we would like to appreciate the time you have given to the project. Also, would like to express our great gratitude for open and sort of you were to engage with your own feelings and bring them out, right, and put them out in the public. It's not very easy, right? Some papers, there's a lot of drama in it, but it's also one I think thing about autoethnography. It can also be very therapeutic, right? Is like when you write about your own things and you share it with people, it helps to understand like what happened to yourself better, but also to come into terms with some things that might not have been in your life. So yeah, I would like also to thank again a couple of people in the audience here who were a very important part of right. So Zarina, right, or at least she was here at some point. I think maybe she left.
Emil, can I make just a quick point?
Yeah, sure, Ulan.
So yeah, Alima mentioned the Kazgaradok, and recently I was crossing nearby, and what I've got that this little world of Kazgaradok practically disappeared now. there is almost nothing left. They put like huge hangars there to like stockpiles for construction materials. People left, and I think, I mean, not only my autoethnography, but probably, I don't know how it, after maybe 20, 40 years, if people would still read them, we would probably give some interesting pieces of the world, of this Soviet and post-Soviet world, which just physically disappeared. I mean, this culture, we mentioned these cultural centers, yoga centers, I don't know, Ahmadiyya centers, Kazgaradok. These things just kind of the whole idea of dynamic. They're disappearing, you know. I mean, so.
Yeah, so that's why, yeah, the stories are very, very important. Yeah. So, so just one more time, I would like to say thanks to Zarina, right, Urmambetova, to Daniar Karabayev, to Alexandra Filatova, to Aysel Kynbotova, who were all a part of this big discussion on Ketmen, right? And now finally, you know, after so many years, it happened, right? It was there. So now we go the first, like the first bird, like Первая ласточка is out, the special issue on the autoethnography. And now we'd like to ask to start contributing. Right? So please submit your own papers. Please think about special issues you would like to organize. We're very, very happy to work with this space to help us together the local Central Asian knowledge on Central Asia. So thanks everyone for participation, for joining us today. Thank you especially to for your valuable comments. Many thanks to all the authors, Hikoyat, Sofya, Ulan, and